Okay, politics of parks, right? So when I was a young guy, I was going to become a landscape architect. I thought I'll get to design great parks and all this cool stuff. And really what my job will be as a landscape architect will be to delight people, right? Make them happy. Everything's going to be so beautiful, right, that I'm going to get to do, right? But this is the reality of most of my life. People hate parks. They hate trails. They really do, if they're new. And what I've learned is it's really change is the thing that they hate. And like a new park is change, right? And if it's in your backyard, I don't know who's going to use it and why are they going to use it, and there's going to be loud music, right? So it's really complicated stuff. And then you learn this stuff. They don't teach you this in school, right? You learn this kind of on the go, unfortunately. Like, why are they yelling at me? So anyway, the park, right? So Charles, he was adamant, you guys need to go to the park. You need to go look at it, understand it, and bring some point of view and knowledge about it here to the meeting. So I, took it upon myself to go out. So the park has this like really great kind of entry spot there, right? And then it has this great kind of, views across, the wilderness that's, that you can see. The picnicking grounds, they're used. I keep hearing about the camping that happens there at Easter is awesome. And then there's boat rides on the San Antonio River, right? That are, what? Okay, you're right. That's not really the park, is it? But that's my point, right? It's very confusing where that park is and what is the park, right? If I told, well, actually, I showed these pictures to my kid, and she's like, Dad, I want to go to Brackenridge Park. That looks like fun. Like, no, that's not it. So history, right? So let's think about, I did find the actual park eventually. Thank you, Tom. This picture's great. This could be, I don't know when this is. This could be 1880 or it could be 1980, right? There's danger. There's some weird diving board these kids have set up. There's a big stick. Someone's going to get poked in the eye for sure. There's a weird hut in the back that, God only knows what these guys are doing back there. There's danger. It's everything, right? And I think I love this. This is like what a park should be, I think. And, there's this rich history, these postcards that, we dredged up of, the tea gardens, just, this rich vegetation and landscapes. This thing, which isn't there anymore, right? But, that's like pretty fun. My kid would want to do that. But it's that these are this postcard place, right? That the park has this history of being, and I think that's a question that as the park gets developed and as we move forward is like, is it still a postcard place? That's a great question, right? And if it's not, how do we make it more so? And if it is, how do we take those places that are the postcard places and turn the volume up on them so it's even more so? The pictures from the 70s and stuff. So people are still loving it, right, today, and the boat rides and the train, everything. And, this is so Texas, right? I can't get enough of it. And, I don't know where it stands now, but I know that in one of the master plan kind of permutations, getting rid of this was a big part of it, right? And I can see the reasons why. It's like you're putting tires and oil and all kinds of gunk into this really beautiful river system. But again, it's Texas, and this stuff is fun. So I don't know where I stand on this. So I thought I was going to be clever, and I was going to talk a lot about water, and nobody else would think about that, right? So anyway, but look, when I was there, the springs were gushing, and it was amazing. The Blue Hole was full of water, right? And there's all these different kinds of water that are in the park. And so I just started taking pictures of it, right? Spring water. There's creek water, which is different. It's a different color and shade. There's the acequia water, right? And it does its thing. There's weir water, and it's splashy, and it's dark at the same time. There's dark water because the bottom is dark, and who knows what's in it. There's old water, it looks like, I don't know what this thing used to do, but it's important, right? There's the sluice gate, there's, these kind of bowls that were, they look like they're vessels to hold water, but they're part of the decorative part of these gardens, right? But they hold water. You pump water, there's river water, there's a bridge over troubled water, and even the ditches, though, it's kind of bizarre, but even the ditches seem important, right? There's something about them. This is not well tended. This is not taken care of. Nobody really understands what this is, but this stuff is important. And I think that story is really the story of the park, and we need to figure out how to just really tell it. All the different things that water does, all the different ways that we move through it, right? And over time, we've kind of degraded it. We've, right after the spring, right, where all this stuff starts, I mean, not far from that, there's water from roads are running off, from parking lots, there's, treated sewage effluent, there's all this stuff that wants to come into the river and start to change it dramatically. And that's just modern day engineering, right? It's a park that, right, wasn't designed necessarily, it just kind of happened. And these sort of things just start to happen. So we need to think about that, right? So, where is the park, right? So this, like these gardens, right? If I go to the website, like, is this in the park or not? It's not, right? But it's on the website, right? There's golf, there's the tea house, there's knowledge is in the park, there's animals in the park, right? There's education, which is kind of creeping into the park. And all that stuff is good stuff. But it does pollute the idea that I'm not sure about the park. I don't know where it really is. I don't know how to get there. That's why I ended up at Kitty Park, right, instead of this other one. So conflict, right? This park is full of conflict. And a lot of the work that we do, what I've found over the years, it's about really resolving conflict. I mean, if you look at a map like this, it just shows, a 1 mile area. So that's like a 5-minute bike ride. So if you live within that 1 mile area, this is a neighborhood park for you. But if you live 5 miles away, it's a regional park. And neighborhood people and regional park people, they want to do very different things in that park, right? So there's a conflict that's just immediately set in motion. And that's what, a good master plan needs to figure out how to deal with. But it's also education. It's also trying to figure out how do you have events and things to do for the people that live 5 miles away as well as those that are close by. So I'm supposed to talk about Buffalo Bayou Park. This is this big thing that we've done in Houston, and it's pretty cool for a major reason, which is that it changed the way people think about Houston. It changed things that they go out and do. You see Houstonians jogging, like we're like supposed to be the heaviest city in the country, right? Nobody jogs, right? Well, apparently they do on the bayou. But it changed our identity, and like the pictures that you used to see of like space and oil and all that stuff, that's Houston. Now it's like bayous and nature. That's pretty cool. But with all that stuff, I don't want to talk about that project because we've been talking about it so much. It's also the park that I think the city, people didn't know that they knew. They didn't know that they needed it, right? So it's while we solved a lot of problems and it's extremely complicated, the things we did there, I think it's, in some ways it's simpler maybe than the problems that you guys have that we need to face with this park to move it forward. So in Baton Rouge, it's a different project. It was more full of conflict, people yelling at me, right? So the Baton Rouge Lakes project, this is a master plan that we recently completed in Baton Rouge. And this is a beautiful, beautiful cultural resource that's right in the heart of the city. There's beautiful homes. There are, within that 1 mile circle, there's people that don't have very much money, and there's people with, all the money. And that's kind of all comes together in this one spot. It's extremely beautiful, but it's dying. And so if you look at a picture like this and you try to convince someone that this is a dying landscape and you have to act now, it's pretty tough. So Susan Turner's somewhere in the audience, but she worked with us to understand the history of the lakes and did a ton of research on this project. But this is kind of where it came from. In the 20s, if you had a wetland, what did you do? You got rid of it. You drain the swamp, right? You turn it into a lake. You get rid of this stuff, right? Now we're like, we're building wetland parks, right? Everything in China right now is a wetland park. So we got rid of this big swamp. It was to put people to work, right? So it had admirable goals behind it, but nobody really thought it through. It wasn't really a designed place. It wasn't really supposed to be a park necessarily, although people certainly have used it that way since it started. This was it during construction. This is guys with shovels made this lake, right, from a wetland. Dynamite and shovels. I mean, it's crazy stuff. And this is what it looks like today, right? But this is a guy on a bike ripping along on a road that was not designed with, no one rode bikes when this road was put in place. You can see the slopes, which are, they're kind of beautiful, but it's elephant ear and stuff that's not native. It's slowly eroding away because the wind keeps eating away at the edges. None of this stuff is designed, but yet it's so loved and so used. But people don't really think it through that, wow, you're right. It's not, engineers just kind of built some stuff and we used it. But, you know, you can see like it's an extremely beautiful place. It has this wildlife. These pelicans show up once a year and just do the craziest things. But it's like, you know, this is a guy's house is right here, and there's people fishing, and that's the Interstate 10 highway in the background. There shouldn't be pelicans there, but they are. There's jogging, there's running, there's races, you know, but there's conflict. This is a fish kill. This is a picture of, you know, not too long ago. The water gets hot, the oxygen goes away, the fish start to die. It's pretty horrible, right? But then you talk to the neighbors, and like, okay, we got to do something about it. But if you don't have a fish kill in 3 years, you forget about it, right? And that's just kind of the way that we work as humans. There's also other conflicts. You know, it's surrounded by roads, and there's fraternity boys and girls, sorority girls, and cars get driven into lakes all the time. And there's nostalgia too, right? So like this is shortly after the lakes were built, and there's, you know, I don't know, the Chi Omega sorority sisters are paddling across, right? And today, we have this nostalgia where we still want to do the same things, right? Which is important. But I think this is the other conflict, and this is ridiculous, but we do very different things in our parks today than we did 100 years ago, right? So while there's like the idyllic idea of the canoe, I mean, today it's a paddleboard, but I'm fishing and I got an outboard. Anyway, it goes crazy, right? But there's this thing, right? I mean, like people used to do, well, jazzercise, right? But now it's Zumba. So if you had designed for jazzercise in your park some time ago, right now you'd have to redesign it. And this is kind of that plop and drop thing where there may actually be a role for that so long as you realize that there are components to parks that are temporary, and there's other things that are extremely permanent, right, that need to be that armature that everything else fits within. But you can't design for this guy because this is not going to be popular 15 years from now. Or if it ever was. The other thing that we forget too is nature, right? So when people look at the LSU lakes, they think nature. This is God's hand. They made this. He made this, right? And then they forget that, well, no, actually some guys with shovels built it. But there's also, and it might be hard to read, but there's a ton of laws that make this stuff happen too, right? So no matter, even if you're in Yosemite, there's the Clean Air Act that lets Yosemite actually have clean air, or these lakes, right? There's the federal water pollution control amendments. So even places that don't appear to be designed, they actually are highly designed through policy that, you know, we make in the public. So you have to try to educate people about that sort of stuff as well, and that kind of conflict. So other conflicts, so you can see the lakes there kind of in the middle, but then you see the watershed. And so if you pour something horrible down the drain further up, it ends up in the lakes, but you don't think of it that way. So education is a huge part of trying to get a project like this to move forward. What we do is we go on this particular project, we went in and dug into just kind of understanding all the issues with water quality. Why was it so bad? What was happening with it? What was along the edges? Lots of erosion, different types of land uses happening around the edges, and a lot of social issues, meaning that there's some neighborhoods that look, I mean, it's hard to imagine that this happened, but it looks like they've been strategically fenced off from the lake system, and these are disadvantaged neighborhoods. There's other areas that look like they're extremely welcoming. There's issues with cars and pedestrians mixing throughout the zone, because again, remember, it's not designed. People are just using it today as they feel like they want. So you add all those things up, massive amounts of challenges that we have to overcome. And I think this was kind of the biggest eye-opener, was the implied ownership. And I think this is kind of an issue with Brackenridge Park, is like, who owns it, right? Is that the zoo's park? Or is that the Whitty's park? Like, what is that? And in Baton Rouge Lakes, it was the same thing. We had to understand how the public perceived ownership. This is all owned by the Louisiana State University, except for the smaller lake, which is owned by the city. But if you're a resident, it feels like that's your front yard. You own that, right? If you're the university, they're not actually paying for any of this stuff, but they want to kind of own it. So it gets into just very complicated things of just perception. And so you can see things that the neighbors have come out and built their docks. They have little bird houses. They've done their own landscape projects. It's not clear who maintains things. And then there's the conflicts with different types of people trying to do things within this lake system, and they haven't all been necessarily invited by those implied owners, right? There's other conflicts that happen. So we thought, let's make this a world-class destination. They hated that idea. So, that's what I want to build, right? And they're like, no, well, that's not what this project is. Yeah, destination, that's great. But to them, this meant like that people from, I don't know, Vancouver or from France were going to come to the lakes and occupy it and make it hard to use, right? And we were just thinking, no, it's like a world-class, ecological space that's in a very urban, context, because that doesn't happen often. So to resolve conflict, we use a lot of public engagement. That's our tool. And with what I've gone back and tried to convince myself about public engagement, because what you don't want to do is suggest to the public that we're going to vote ourselves a park. Like, how many swings do you want? Let's vote. 6. Okay. You want to educate them, right? And then you want to move forward a conversation, and you have to keep it going. The way I've tried to think of it is that at the end of the public engagement process, I should be like a politician. The city council should have enough, kind of strength after this to send out a bond measure, and the mayor gets reelected, right? If you do those things, if you do this right, those things happen. And the park gets built too. So the way we did this, a lot of engagement. We did this idea polling thing. We had keypads. People did vote, but they voted on what kinds of things do you like, right? Not just, how many swings should we get? We had them build their own park, right? And I think earlier we looked at that having been done at Hemisphere Park. The idea with the build your own park thing is cool because what it does is, one, it makes the public have to sit there and they do your job for you. And they realize not only do we not like parks, but they're hard. Parks are hard. It's hard to design these things. And they also then have to, organize between themselves and decide what are they going to do and what are they not going to do. So a lot of these arguments get filtered out just through people sitting at a table and realizing that these guys are trying to make a nice park for us. Yeah, it's a hard job that they have ahead of them. We show them framework plans. We put it all together. So, it's stuff that looks like this. There's lots of big meetings. We try not to do paste the things on the wall. Have them engage themselves, right? We document all that stuff to see what they came up with. They can make up their own things. And then you kind of lay out the general themes of what you saw so that you can go back and say, hey guys, remember at this meeting we all agreed that we kind of wanted this thing or we didn't want this other thing? It then lets you move forward and not keep circling back. This is the kind of questions that we ask. How do you use the lakes, right? We're not asking you, do you want a cafe necessarily? We ask you what elements are you interested in, and 7% said a cafe. So when you don't have a cafe, you can go back and say, that wasn't really highly supported, right? And then ongoing, right? You can't just show up and do a few meetings. You have to keep the conversation going. Otherwise, people feel like they just kind of dunked their toe in the water here, but they didn't really get to be a major part of the decision-making process. You want to continue to hear them, even after the plan is approved. So one technique is to develop 3 plans that you're not going to do either of them. What we did on this one was we said, let's do a cultural landscape. It's just all about preservation and kind of history. Let's do an ecological one. It's just, turn the volume up on making everything green. We'll do a sports and recreation one, right? And then how much of each? And of course, at the end, everyone comes together and realizes we need a little bit of all of this, right? So the eco people kind of hear from the sports people and vice versa, and you kind of have a way to meet in the middle. Education's a big part of it. Teach people what's working and what isn't within the fabric of the park system. So this was kind of why it's dying, why the water quality is so bad. A lot of education into that. And then you can say, look, this is the baseline. We should do this, and it's going to cost this much money. We also said that for every aquatic kind of ecological thing we do, there should be a social benefit that's paired to it exactly, right? So you want to do both at the same time. We get more support, right? If paddle boarders understand, hey, there's a place for me to get my paddleboard in and out, then they'll also support upgrading the water, right? Then you look at, the good, better, best, and the people can start to understand how much more complicated, how much more money is involved to do these things. So this project's on this flyway. It's where all the birds want to move from well, what, baby ducks are born in Saskatchewan, right? Pelicans are, who knew? And they come all the way down the Mississippi River and they end up in the Gulf of Mexico. We tapped into, can we get BP oil money? Can we get Hurricane Katrina money? All this kind of stuff that we tried to get into to use for informing how we would frame the design so that money would become available. That's important. But that informed a lot of what we did. Of course, all this, complicated lake stuff that we're doing. And in the end, we wanted metrics. We wanted real numbers that we could say, look, how much better should we make the water? We're not going to make it 100%, but is 80 a good metric? How do we get there? What would we have to do to make that happen, right? How do we make people more healthy, right? By putting certain exercise things right in their face. You can see people jogging, I want to do that too, right? Those kinds of things. Access to the water so that they understand water quality issues, so piers and things. We did a lot with the hydrology of changing the way that those guys had engineered it, in the 1920s, so that we could design it today so it actually did the things we wanted it to do. So a lot of what we ended up doing tried to say, well, maybe it's not a world-class destination, but it's still a destination. But it's about birding, right? A lot of people travel the world to see birds, and this is a place where there's a major opportunity. So rather than just having everyone go anywhere to take pictures of the pelicans, right? We build these bird blinds. It's very specific sort of ecological resources that we put in there to attract them. But now you can kind of be in very strategic places. You're not going to harass the pelicans. We want to make sure they keep coming back. We want to look at infrastructure, right? Can we put bat habitat underneath bridges, right? We have those in Texas. That's a thing that we do here. Can we transplant that in Louisiana? Yes. And there's other funny things in doing these sort of projects. I mean, all of the vegetation that you see, it's easy to go online and just grab some weird grasses or some plants and stick them in, and nobody knows that grows in, I don't know, in India, not in Louisiana, right? But we went to extreme measures to make sure that everything in these illustrations actually could be here and should be here. Exercise, we talked about all these kinds of things. And then there's just complicated techniques for dredging and restoring and draining the lakes and filling them back up, and what do you do with the animals in the meantime? Creating that urban habitat. And, kind of in the end, I mean, this one, I think, sums it up in a big way. It's this really beautiful place. Birding is everywhere, but you're just kind of engulfed in nature. And this beautiful place is now designed to do all the things that it wants to do, but it was never really designed to do to start with. So I come back, to this scene, and it's like, maybe this is what we should aspire to for Brackenridge Park, right, in the future. It's not to say that it needs to look just like this, but if you look at the things that are going on, they're all the things that a great park would have, right? There's views, there's clean water, people are exercising, there's a family there, they're playing, there's trails, there's some mystery, there's native gardens and things. There's a clubhouse, right? And as I was taking on a tour and pointed out all the great spots where a bar could go in the to get cocktails in the park. So that's the place. The clubhouse is where you get the cocktails. So anyway, that's it. That's kind of my idea. Solving the conflicts, I think, is going to be job one to move it forward. And I know you guys can do it. Just got to get out there and get yelled at some. So.